So the idea that I want to, for example, touch upon here today is the idea of freedom, the idea of, for example, understanding yourself and the kind of choices you can make. You know, man, it's very cliche. ये कहना बहुत cliche लगता है कि मतलब यार थोड़ा सा rebel करो, थोड़ा सोचो अपने बारे में, अपने आप को. अब मैं ये तो नहीं कहना चाहता वो शाहरुख खान वाली लाइन की रात में खड़े हो जाओ शीशे के सामने, लाइंस रिहर्स करो और तुम बहुत बड़े एक्टर बन जाओगे. All that is really high level BS, which is only told to people to sell the skin whitening cream and all. ऐसा होता नहीं है. Generally, for example, what happens is there is a state of confusion that you go through when you're in college. वो एक flux होता है. When, for example, you're trying to discover things, you really don't understand the kind of choices presented towards you. And there is the whole system in our, for example, society set at large, which I call the evil indoctrination. जहाँ पर you are set out to believe that if you make certain choices in life, you, for example, would be more acceptable, which could be probably picking up a six-figure salary with a blue chip company when you graduate, or for the matter of fact, writing for CAT, or probably anything else, for example, which seems acceptable in the general sense of the society. So that evil indoctrination happens in a very subtle manner in a society. You have a peer group that talks the same thing. You go back to your home, your parents are doing the same thing. You, for example, set out with internet now, you, for example, see so many people successful after graduating because they're doing A, B, C, D, E. And that whole network, that whole nexus is very difficult to break. And then confusion, that confusion in a graduate sometimes drive him to in certain areas that he doesn't want to. And he figures out somewhere very later in his life कि यार ये शायद this is not what I wanted to do. Then he becomes either a bass guitarist like Rahul Ram, or he probably sets out to, for example, do other things. But this particular trait or this particular understanding that ये confusion is good for me, this confusion is going to give me something more beneficial to me, is a very common DNA that an entrepreneur shares with any other people, any other person. So the idea here for all you people, I'm expecting that the general crowd here is in college, is either in third, fourth year, is trying to understand. Even if you're not in college, you've graduated, well, you can have the common questions, the common confusions that everybody has. But the idea is that an entrepreneur, or a person who, not even an entrepreneur, the person who wants to set out, probably become independent and own his own choices, uske confusions common hote hain. So the one thing that people, that you would, for example, should like to do is understand this evil indoctrination. Evil indoctrination is, there is a certain set of expectations that are laid upon you. I'm not talking about parents in general or probably friends in general, but what you understand from yourself, from your own choices. And I'll try to set it with the context of, for example, what it means to an entrepreneur when he probably deals with the same confusion. So I'm going to largely talk about 3-4 very, very basic, for example, how should I put it? 5-6 very basic problems that or cues of confusion that a graduate, for example, faces when he set out to probably graduate. The first biggest thing that a lot of people think when they're graduating, or probably, for example, a lot of people think journey in life, or are probably infatuated to a certain degree, is the stigma of failure. Failure is anything. Failure is to do with anything where, for example, you're not able to make sense. ये मेरे साथ क्यों हुआ? And failure has anything to do with the fact where you're not able to accept the fact, what should I do with it now? So the stigma of failure is so brazen and blatant in a society that the fear of failure, the stigma of failure sometimes makes you not do certain things. So what happens if, I don't know, for example, how many of you would understand this, but this looks very, very ironic that the willingness to fail sometimes often gives you the ability to succeed, which essentially means that sometimes there is a possibility that you feel कि हाँ यार अगर शायद graduate करने के बाद मैंने McKinsey, Bain या कोई और blue chip company में काम नहीं किया तो शायद क्या हो जाएगा? शायद, for example, 2 साल 3 साल बाद I would not graduate to a 6-7 figure salary. शायद 2-3 साल बाद मेरा matrimonial का ad, for example, Times of India की prime listing पे नहीं आएगा, जो भी है. For example, the willingness to understand that if something not happens in my life, what could be the possible repercussions? So what essentially happens with people is they're afraid of jumping very high now. Risk taking doesn't really mean that someday you wake up in the morning, you go out front of the mirror and you say like यार शायद मैं भी Steve Jobs बन सकता हूँ, शायद मैं भी, for example, next Mark Zuckerberg बन सकता हूँ. हालांकि that's not a bad thing to say to yourself, but the idea that I'm only going to do certain things when, for example, I see certain things happening, or the idea that I'll only try it to the point where I seem that I feel safe enough. The entire, for example, fear of not jumping high enough, and I'll tell you a very interesting example of, for example, why it means so much to young entrepreneurs. You know, the idea of risk is not going out in, for example, the public space and telling yourself कि हाँ मुझे जाकर फेल ही करना है, मुझे जाकर इस चीज को बर्बाद ही करना है, मुझे नई गाड़ी मिली है, जाकर ठोक के ही देखना है कि भाई मुझे गाड़ी चलानी आती है नहीं आती. That's not the idea of risk. The idea of risk is the scare, the paranoia that I know what can happen if I fail, but I am okay with it. So there is a very interesting, for example, index around it called the age risk proportionality index. And just think about it for a moment. I don't know, for example, how many of you have probably set out to probably think, or even think within, when you have some aloof time, that I want to, for example, go out and do something that I've never tried doing, or for example, I will try to do out something which a lot of people will come out and discourage me doing. So the chances of making, or chances of even thinking of a foolish endeavor is inversely proportional to your age. The lesser your age is, the higher the chances is that you are going to not feel scared about making a very, very, very foolish endeavor, which could be anything. I don't know, you're in engineering college, you want to become a dentist, or you're in engineering college, you wanted to, for example, become a car mechanic. I don't know, whatever, for example, you had been set out to achieve, that foolish endeavor is going to be always, always inversely proportional to your age. Which essentially means that, for example, if you start out early, and जब भी लोगों को होश आता है, whenever, for example, you start out, that's the best time to go out, to sit with yourself and think whether there was something that I would like to do, but in no certain ways I can do it now. The best thing, the best time to do it is when, for example, you're very, very young. And the ego that comes with failure, or the ego of embarrassment that comes with failure, is directly proportional to your age. 30, 40 ke baad, obviously there is no hard science about it. Obviously it can change depending on, for example, what you wanted to do. If you're in engineering college, you wanted to, for example, you somehow want to become like someone like Kejriwal, 20 साल और लग जाएंगे, but हाँ हो सकता है कि वो कुछ लोगों के लिए foolish हो, कुछ लोगों के लिए नहीं हो. इस एज में तो foolish कभी नहीं लगेगा, but 50 साल के बाद, for example, or when you are, for example, in trading with a comfortable six-figure salary in a blue chip company, तुम्हें ऐसा लगेगा कि, for example, now is the time to probably do something I did not do, but I always thought of when I was young. It's going to be very, very hard because the ego of embarrassment and failure is going to be very, very high. Now, I know saying all this is pretty easy, and a lot of this is cliche. Cliche इसलिए भी है क्योंकि यार a lot of time when you, for example, hear entrepreneurs say it, you know ये इसलिए कह रहा है क्योंकि इसका खुद का तो एक बार ये कर चुका है ऐसा, और शायद इसने अपना खुद टांग पे कुल्हाड़ी मारी होगी, इसलिए हमें भी कह रहा है सब कहने के लिए. ऐसा नहीं है. It doesn't really work that way. What happens is a lot of people who take the hard plunge go out and succeed are the people who tell the story. So look, success matters and failure is inconsequential. Nobody talks of failure. Really, nobody talks of failure, and it should never be that consequential. But what happens with failure is you learn to understand how much can you take it and how much are you willing to take it in case, for example, you repeat the same process again. Essentially meaning, if you understand that failing is not that bad, or the idea of failing is not that bad, if you went out and did a very foolish endeavor and you failed, the quotient of acceptance of that failure is going to be that very high. I'm going to just run a small clip here of an alumnus of IT Delhi who's a very famed investor and entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley, Mr. Vinod Khosla, who I admire greatly, and I think his understanding of failure is something that would resonate with you a little more than what I'm trying to explain. So if you just, for example, can listen to us for 30 minutes, I think he's going to make you understand what it really means to accept failure. Going to run. The meantime that the video runs, I'll just explain you the context of this video. So we know that in fact
everybody knows the company. We also, how many people here know a company called the Data Dump? Not a single hand. My point is the following. McNeely and I started Sun. Everybody knows the company. We also, 3 months before we started Sun, started a company called the Data Dump that failed. Nobody remembers failures. In fact, my point is, success matters. Failure is inconsequential. Yet, what I hear most people do is not do things because they're afraid of failing. People's fear of failure restricts them from doing most of what they can do. I like to say most people are limited by what they think they can do, not by what they can do. And I'll come back to why it's not quite that simple, but it is much more true than not true. I long ago adapted, and I was very lucky. I graduated from Stanford Business School, and frankly, I had nothing. So when I met my first VC to take money, who was willing to give me money, I said, this is a great deal. If we win, we win. If we lose, you lose, because the only thing I could possibly lose was my student loans. I didn't have anything else. Yeah. Now, that was very liberating. And as soon as you accept the willingness to fail, you can start to actually do things that matter.
Look, again, I don't know. I don't find it cliche. I really don't find it cliche. I'll tell you why. When I was in my last or penultimate year, like pre-final year, I had not the same confusion, but I was the same state of confusion. Ki yaar, matlab, why is it important for me to graduate, for example, with a consulting firm like McKinsey, Bain, or other blue chip company, or what exactly, or more fundamentally, what is that I have to do? So even after graduating after a year, I in fact changed a couple of companies, and I was placed with Britannia when I graduated, and I really didn't want to sell peanut butter and yogurt all my life, so I did not continue with Britannia. But and I used to, for example, be present at a lot of these conferences, sitting probably on the other side of the dais, and trying to understand whether the speaker कि यार ये सब कह तो रहा है कि करो पहले तो करना इतना मुश्किल और कर लें और कुछ हुआ नहीं, उसके बाद क्या होगा? What do we do? So the answer, उसके बाद क्या होगा, is something that almost nobody has an answer to. And the idea of accepting failure is the idea that you really don't care what will happen after that. And in fact, if you listen to the story of Faisal or anybody else here, होता कुछ है नहीं. It really is irrational fear in your mind that not lets you make certain decisions, but really time passes by. And you'd always, for example, come to a stage, or look, as a matter of fact, if a lot of you people are scared of the fact that I would not have enough money if I, for example, don't graduate with a 6-figure salary, or if I would not have money if, for example, I leave a job which has a 6-figure salary. I'll tell you, poverty is not permanent. Misery is. Misery is permanent. And the fact that you've not been able to do something that you wanted to do stays with you and hurts you as long as, for example, you're not doing the same thing. So the idea of accepting failure is not about, for example, going out and, getting your, for example, knees bruised unnecessarily. It is accepting the fact that if something doesn't work, it's not going to, for example, hurt that much. It's not going to scare you to the point that you'll not, for example, do it. So that's the idea of accepting failure. Now, again, a cliche point, but very important for people who are graduating, is that a lot of us make choices because either we don't know what, for example, inspires us or personally motivates us, or doing what you love is really, really very hard. Like it's not easy. That's the general perception of people. Either I don't know मुझे क्या करना है, I really have no idea what is one thing that I would like to do. It could be anything, man. I don't know. A lot of people, this is the first time I'm addressing a college in Delhi. I, for example, talk to a lot of people in Bangalore and Bombay, and the first thing, if I ask this question to a lot of people tell me, I got into engineering college, but I really wanted to become a politician. I was like, really? He was like, really? And it really, for example, makes you believe. It has sometimes, for example, you're doing what you love has no rational reason. You love because you love something, but the more, for example, bigger task is, for example, trying to understand what you love. So the second trait, what, for example, makes you not make choices of your own is either doing what you love is not easy, or probably you have no idea, for example, what you love. So this point of time when you're graduating, or probably in your third year or pre-final year, the best time to figure out whether there is something that you would like to do when you graduate. Look, you graduate, and there, for example, you're going to join a company where essentially what you're doing is you're trying to fulfill somebody else's dream. Fazil here, for example, took a cycle ride from Himalayas to the Kanyakumari. There are, for example, other crazy ideas that people want to do. Speaking more rationally, if you graduate and work with somebody else, you're really trying to fulfill somebody else's dream. Do you have enough time in the world to probably go out and help somebody else? Really? Do you, for example, not have dreams of your own that you want to fulfill and probably, I don't know, make it large enough to create an impact? So failure is really inconsequential if you don't do it. But if you really want to do something, make it count. Make something where success really has an impact. So that's the idea of it. And the reason why we don't do it is, again, as I said, we are passive about our choices. And the second thing here, which I don't know how much it resonates with you people, but passion versus money. Like, there's absolutely no science to it. And a lot of people, for example, don't understand what, for example, passion really means to them. But to put it very simply for you, a lot of times, for example, you try doing something that really has no connection with, for example, how much it would mean for your career or your personal life, but it really gives you that small joy. An entrepreneur really is a person who really converts that joy in something that happens throughout his life and becomes, for example, a talking point of his career. So that's essentially passion, and there's nothing else to it. And this confusion that you have right now, probably when you're graduating, or probably when you graduate, is the confusion that it would either drive you to your passion, or it's going to take you further away from it. So this confusion is good. Like, if a lot of you people are confused here as to, for example, what you want to do, and what's the one thing that could inspire you for the rest of your life, that confusion is going to help you a lot. I'm going to show you another small video here, and I'm just showing you these videos because, it is very difficult to set the context of these things right here. First, really, I'm not a big name. If I would mean someone like Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of you people would have believed me instantly. हाँ ये कह रहा है, इसने तो किया है यार, ये कह ही रहा है. Other thing is, for example, my personal journey in life is also trying to understand how these things have. So I've personally lived a lot of these things, maybe not achieved the kind of success that usual metric of success is. I don't know, a big company having a big office. You've sold your company multiple times. You made, for example, $1 billion for yourself. A lot of these things have not personally happened for me. But what has certainly happened is that this confusion has made me ask these questions again and again to myself and to people around. So to just set the context right here, I'm just going to show you another video. And this is again by a guy in the Silicon Valley. And I keep, look, there are hardly any role models here in India. And I'm very sad to probably say it that way. But at least in entrepreneurship, at least in spaces where people have gone out and probably made an independent mark of themselves, there are hardly any role models that you would like to follow. So about passion and what you want to, how do you, for example, get to achieving something, or how do you get to, understanding what you love is something that I want to, for example, show it in a video. So,
school, and I know I'm in Silicon Valley, and so I know all that. But man, don't start a business or take a curriculum up because you think that that's what's hot. You should really, truly, and I know this is a cliche, you should really, truly study and do what you love. And I can't promise you if you do that, the money will come. But I can promise you, if you do stuff that, if you take a curriculum or you start a company simply for the money, you'll probably end up miserable. Now, you may end up miserable and poor. You may also end up miserable and rich. It might seem an oxymoron, but that's very possible. So I would encourage you to do what you love, and then probably you'll do okay at it. Or you may love it so much that the money won't matter. But
kind of people who end up miserable and rich are consultants and investment bankers who essentially get into it for no reason of their own, because there's too much peer pressure, or probably, well, I don't know. I've not come across anybody who admires Goldman Sachs or Lehman Brothers for that fact. I've not come across anybody who admires, I don't know, Bain and Company. Look, I have no disrespect for these companies and all, but man, complete BS, complete bullshit life that you're going to lead when you, for example, work for investment banking. Aim should be higher. The aim should be probably trying to understand what you can probably love and probably keep doing it. So in this context, the kind of people who end up miserable and rich are those kind of people. And so that's about it. And so look, these last 3-4 points are coming from a very high level understanding of, for example, what do you want to do in life. I don't know whether all of you would like to, for example, probably create an impact or a change. And impact would necessarily not mean, like it could mean different things for different people. But creating an impact generally means that you are not ready to settle for an inconsequence in life. Inconsequence is the understanding that there's a certain level of mediocrity in my life, there's a certain level of mediocrity in the lives of people around, and I'm okay with it. I really don't care. Like, it's okay. It doesn't really matter. That's the kind of inconsequence that people who don't want to settle with are the kind of people who want to make an impact. And essentially, look, again, creating an impact essentially is trying to make an impact that is 10x better, not 10% better. 10% better, you understand what 10% better is, right? Every year you get an increment in salary which is 10% better than the previous time you